Hello, and welcome to Can't Find My Brain for the Fog with Kendra
and Gina, discussing love, loss, and life after.
All right, we are back. This time we're going to tell Gina's story.
Woo.
Gina and Tim. I'll turn the mic around a little bit better so you can pick you up.
Convoluted story that it will be. I'm a lot older than Kendra, so I got a lot more baggage to uncover. Not really baggage, but so Tim and I got to go back a little bit. Kendra said there's a lot of backstory, but I had gone to graduate school in Alabama, and I moved back home to Kentucky where we live, and was going to my undergraduate school to get an internship. And while I was there, I covered a tennis tournament. And the tennis coach came up to me one day and goes, "Would you like to get a job in a tennis academy in Florida?" And I went, "No." Absolutely not. I was kind of a homebody. I didn't see myself ever leaving where I was from. But then I had a wanderlust. I love to travel and do things, but I really never thought I would live outside of where I lived. But I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'll go do this job, and I'll go for a month, and if I like it, I'll stay. If I don't like it, I'll come back home. So it was like in 1988. Like I said, I'm older than Kendra, so a long time ago. I went to the job, I stayed, I hated it, and I stayed 2.5 years. I didn't really hate it after a while, but the first month was really hard. In that time while I was there, in 1990, this guy comes into my office. I was an athletic trainer. So this guy comes into my office, hops up on my table, had this gorgeous Australian accent, and the most piercing blue eyes I'd ever seen. Just, he was gorgeous. That's what I thought. But really didn't float my boat.
Yeah.
I don't think he was interested in me. I wasn't interested. He would say he was interested in me. I say I was not interested in him. I was actually in baseball mode, had a crush on a baseball player, didn't even look twice at Tim. During that time, he was a player worker. So he was playing on a satellite tour at the time. It was like minor league pro tennis, I would say. They played 4 tournaments in the state of Florida, and he had come to play those tournaments. But while he was at my academy, he was training and working his way through. Some point in time, he ran out of money. So he decided to come stay at my house and sleep on my futon. So I always say if that futon could talk, it would really tell a lot of things, because a lot of people slept on that futon. Anybody that was displaced on a baseball team, kids that got kicked out of the academy came and slept on that futon, and Tim slept on that futon. So that was kind of how we got to know each other. That was maybe only a 3 or 4 week span of time in the great scheme of things. And then we went our separate ways. Fast forward 2007, so from 1990 to 2007, I sent him a few Christmas cards, but we had no... I tried to find him in 2000. He was Australian, so I tried to find him in 2007 when I went to the Olympics, and I couldn't find him. Wrote him letters. Don't really know where those letters went because his address never changed. But in 2007, my friend and I were talking, and she goes, the other day I was using this thing called Google. I was like, oh. And I don't think Google was really new, but it was new to us as a search engine to find people.
Right.
So she looked up a boyfriend that she had found. She said, "Is anybody ever you wanted to find?" I said, "That's funny. I remember this guy when I was at the tennis academy. He had the greatest blue eyes. I'm sure he's married and has 10 kids, but let's Google him." So we Googled him, and we found him in back in those days. There were chat rooms. You went into a chat room to talk to people. And he was in a chat room trying to find his dad's Irish ancestry, because his dad's family was Irish and had immigrated to Australia. Okay. And so I found an email, and I go, "Oh, well, that's kind of cool." So I emailed him and I said, "Hey, if you're the same Timothy that used to be at this such and such academy, that's kind of cool." He emailed me back like within a day and said, "Oh my gosh, how are things in Kentucky?" And I was like, I can't believe you remember me. So we started this relationship via email, back and forth. He said, give me 2 weeks. I'm on the road, but when I get back home in 2 weeks, I'll email you and I'll catch you up.
Yeah.
Well, I expected him to say, well, I'm married, I've got 5 kids, or I'm married and divorced. I really don't know what I expected, but I did not expect him to say, I've never married. He'd been engaged at least once that I know of, but he'd never married. And we just started this conversation that lasted from probably July of 2007 till July of 2008 when he finally realized he was going to come to America. And in that time, we sent cards, we sent letters, we instant messaged. That was the thing
That
back
was the
then.
thing. Yep.
We did phone calls. After a while, I did a lot of phone calls, a lot of conversations, and just really just fell in love in letters.
Yeah.
I mean, just fell in love. I mean, that was it. And I go back to the time between 1990 and 2007. Kendra and I have been talking about dating apps and things like that.
Right.
It was funny. An aunt of mine said, you know, you need to date.
Did you
And
try a dating app?
I did. I tried eHarmony, and you just know that your person. I'm not saying I had this grandiose picture like I was going to marry somebody famous,
Right.
but I just knew my person was going to be different. I don't know what
Yeah.
I knew. Maybe I knew he was going to have an accent. I don't know. I
Right.
knew he was just going to be different. So I get on eHarmony, and first of all, they ask you 7,000 questions. And I'm like being picky. You know, I don't want a smoker. I don't want somebody that's married and has kids. And I don't. How many people said, you know, Gina, you're in your 30s. You know, you're not going to find somebody like that. I'm like,
Right.
well, then I won't find anybody.
Right.
I was extremely picky. I didn't have any physical picture, but I just said, you know, this is what I want. And so I did the thing. eHarmony must have been stuck because it took 6 weeks to match me with one person. And the one person lived in a town literally 15 minutes from my house. And I said, I just know my soulmate is not in this city.
Right. He's not 15 minutes from my house.
Don't think that's going to happen. So I didn't even, I think I chatted with the guy a couple times. And I finally said, you know, if you want to chat more, here's my email. And he never followed up.
Yeah.
So I think God was saying, that's not your guy.
I was going to say, if they want to make the effort, they will.
Yeah, they want to. Yeah.
If they want to make the effort, they will. And if he wasn't willing to make the effort to send you an email, then clearly he wasn't
No, I
the
mean,
guy.
and I just knew, I was like, you know, I just don't feel like you're going to be that person. And like we were talking about, in the Christian world, it's very uncomfortable for people to see you at a certain age and single.
Yeah.
And I just had gotten to the place in my life before Tim came along that I was perfectly happy hanging around with the youth group that I was mentoring. I was peaceful about never marrying because I know that in my single life I did a lot more. I did a lot of things when I was married to Tim, but when you're actually single and you are living and you have your own finances and you can do things that you can't ever do married
Right.
to an extent. So I was happy being single, and I really found it offensive when a person who got married when they were 18 told me how great it was to be single when they had no idea.
I read into that sometimes too. Like I would have people that would, and I was in my 20s. You know, I'm talking like in my 20s, but I'm also from a smaller town near here, and it was not common for people to stay around the town and still be single in their 20s. And I had come back.
Yeah.
I had moved away for college and came back, finished my grad school, my master's, and came back. So I get what you're saying as far as that goes, because people, they start to expect you to like you date or you know,
You need
something.
to be having babies
Yeah,
or
like,
something. Yeah.
and it makes people uncomfortable to see you single, I think,
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And it makes people even more uncomfortable when you're comfortable with being single.
Right.
I think that's a hard concept for people
To understand.
to understand, like, that being alone is okay.
It's okay.
Like, and now we find ourselves not single, but we're widows, so
Yeah.
in
So
some
we're
people's
single
books, we're
again.
single again.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I don't have, I'm like you, when I met Tim, I was 27, he was 24. And you said if you had met Jim at a different time, it wouldn't have worked out the same.
Right.
My mother-in-law says, I wish that you all had gotten together way back then. And yeah, I do. I regret that we didn't in a way because I would have loved for Tim to have been a dad. He would have been a great dad.
Yeah.
But I also know who I was and who he was at that time. We probably we may have been divorced if we had married at 24 and 27.
Right.
Or we wouldn't have been able to maintain a relationship because he was traveling the world playing tennis. He came to a place in his life where he realized he was a better coach than he was a player. Yeah. He said when he realized when he set a date to quit is when he started getting good. I was like, well, that's the way it is. He had come to terms with that. And so he was working a job in an iron ore mine in Western Australia. He worked 2 weeks on, 1 week off. So we could talk by sat phone rarely when he was working, but when he would come home for the week, we could talk more often. But I wrote letters, I wrote cards. And so finally, he said, I think I'm going to come back. Meanwhile, he had been back and forth from into the United States while we were separate. From 1990 to 2007, he had been back and forth living in the United States.
But you just hadn't crossed.
But I didn't know it. And when I had tried to find him and send letters, I don't know whether letters never got to him or what happened. But he had decided when he went over to work back home in Australia, he was saving money because he had decided he was going to come back to the United States, go to where he went to his undergrad, and he was going to get a teaching degree. In Australia, you go to school till you're 15, and then you decide to go on to finish high school, what I call it, or you go to a program like being a plumber or an apprentice. Right. He went into a diesel mechanic program.
Okay.
He went into that program and he got into it and he hated it. He went to his dad and he said, what am I going to do? He goes, well, when you finish, we'll talk. So I think it was like a 3-year program, but he got a skill that he used throughout his life. And that's what he was using. He was working on diesel rigs in this iron ore mine. But he thought he would be a great teacher. Mm-hmm. And he had gone to teacher college in Australia, and he was going to come back over here, get his master's in education, and he was going to go to this school in Alabama. Well, when he came to see me in July of 2008, he was going to spend a little time and then move on.
He didn't
move on.
He never left, huh?
It was kind of funny because when you talk about first dates. So I guess our first official date was the night I met him at the airport.
Yeah.
He flew into the airport at Wednesday evening, and he was going to just stay at my house. Well, he actually didn't stay at my house. He got a hotel. I was going to pick him up. A friend of mine helped me pick out, the perfect dress to wear. I get to the airport, super early, and I'm nervous. And, because he's been flying for 24 hours.
Right.
So I'm thinking, oh, my gosh, he's going to be,
grungy at this point.
Yeah, grungy, So I'm all dressed up in this pretty little dress my friend helped me pick out, and I kind of hang back, and I'm waiting until I see people. I want to see him for a way, and kind of get my composure. So I see him coming, and he's coming on, and then finally, I kind of wait back, and he gets to me, and he told me later, he goes, I know what you're doing. You were waiting to see what I look like because you were going to do a runner. You were going to leave me there, and I was like, I would never have done that. But that was our kind of first official date. I brought him home, introduced him to my mom and dad. He spent the weekend in a hotel in our little hometown, and I think the first weekend he was there, we had a family reunion.
Oh, so he got to meet everybody right away.
Oh, yeah. It was my mom's family, and I remember my cousin coming. My cousin has triplets. So the first thing I remember is I'm asleep in, he was staying in my apartment by then. I had an apartment in my mom and dad's house. And I was sleeping upstairs, and he comes into the room with these 2 kids over his shoulders, and I'm like, where's, my cousin? And she goes, she went to Starbucks. I'm like, Starbucks is 20 minutes away in the next town. She left you with her 3 kids? He's just babysitting. I'm like, first weekend you meet a guy, and you're leaving with your kids. So that's kind of how our life started.
She knew she could trust him.
She knew right off, and I think they liked him right off, and it was good. I have a sign on my wall of my house that says, right in the middle of ordinary life, God gives you a fairy tale.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine a guy I would have waited for that would have been any more perfect for me. I mean, he, we like movies. We both regurgitate movie quotes. We talk about life and we'll say, remember that movie that this, and this happened. And that's what life's like. We use it as examples a lot. Our idea of a good day is a long drive.
Yeah.
We drive to another town, have lunch, and traveling. We love to travel. So that was kind of how we, that's kind of how we came to be. And I guess our wedding day, I was 45 when I married. And I don't think I ever romanticized about what my wedding day was going to be like. But I did say by the time I married, I'm going to have me a shindig.
So you had your shindig, huh?
I did. I wore the princess dress, and he would not wear a tux. He went and got a suit, and some of the guys got suits. And I was working with a football team in another county at the time, and so 4 of my ushers were boys from my football team. And one of them came up to me when he got his suit on. He goes, look, my tie's crooked. Literally, the tie's curved. I was like, okay, we're the only wedding party that has crooked ties. But we got married on a Friday evening, which threw people off because some people thought I had gotten the date wrong and missed the wedding because they thought surely I was going to get married on a Saturday.
Now get your weekend started.
Yeah.
Go
Well,
get your honeymoon.
Tim's idea was he wanted to have an extra day on the honeymoon.
Makes sense.
And he also thought that his sister was coming from California, and we have a big event in Kentucky called the Kentucky Derby, and we got married on Derby Eve because he thought that his sister would want to come and spend the weekend and go to the Derby. They did not do the Derby. We later did the Derby together, but we took off on our honeymoon. We spent our honeymoon in my aunt and uncle's house in Hilton Head, so we had a low budget
Nice.
honeymoon too, and spent the week there and went in his little V-dub and had a great time, and it was great. And he was, like I said, you said, I did not marry a perfect man. He did not marry a perfect woman, but he was perfect for me. And I can see God in so many places in our love story, because, like I said, I never wanted to move away.
Right.
I just thought life was right here.
Right.
And I moved to Florida, where I met this man. And actually, before that, I had moved to Alabama to go to school. Had I not gone to school there, I probably wouldn't have been back at my undergrad doing a graduate degree. I was getting my master's in athletic training, and that's when I worked the tennis tournament, which took me to the academy where I met
God,
Tim.
again, was moving all these pieces into place.
He was just, he was working on me and in me. And the one thing that I'll say about our conversations, I did not have the pressure of being on all the time, because he was not right in my face. I could say my heart, every letter, every phone call. I told him the truth about who I was and who I wanted in my life. And not early on, but at some point in time, I think I had a pacemaker put in early in our relationship, and he was worried about me and calling me, and I think that's when I realized this is going to go somewhere.
This guy's serious.
And he sent me flowers a couple of times when I was there that I said, this means friendship. He goes, I didn't want to mean friendship. I was like, oh.
He said, I meant something else.
I meant something else. And maybe he was flirting.
Was,
and I got poems. I got some poems I have to share. He wrote some.
I think it's interesting that you said your all's relationship developed through letters. And one thing, obviously ours was a few years down the road from your all's, but Jim and mine relationship seemed to develop through text message a lot. So it was also through the written word. Because, I worked crazy hours. He had a weird schedule too, and we would just text each other. Yeah. And I seemed also to be more comfortable. I'm more comfortable with the written word. Yeah. I'm doing a podcast. I don't know what I'm thinking, but I am more comfortable with the written word. I'm more comfortable. And so I would say what I was thinking. And I was able to put that, and I think, we talk about how much our relationships kind of paralleled each other, but I think it's true.
And they probably were happening, when did y'all meet?
In 2013.
13, okay. So we were married by then. We were old married people by then. But, where you said about if you had met early, Jim wasn't where he was in his relationship with Jesus Christ. When I was writing letters and sharing with Tim, I said, I'm too old. I'm going to tell you this. This is what I see in relationships I don't like.
Right.
I don't want to go to church by myself.
Right.
I'm big into mission trips. I don't want to go on mission trips by myself.
Right.
I don't want to go. I see a lot of married couples that go everywhere separately, and
didn't want that.
Very rarely you see them together, and you're like, "Are you even married?"
Right.
I wanted people to know we were married.
Do you like each other?
Yeah, do you like each other?
I have had that question before about couples I know, and I'm like, do you even really like each other?
Do you really want to go someplace together? Yeah.
Yeah, and I was kind of candid with Jim in that way too, of like, this is what I want, and I think he found that refreshing.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna play around, and it sounds like you were the same way. Like, we're not gonna beat around the bush. We're just gonna.
And I was bold enough to say, I'd say I want to marry a Christian. Yeah. And he said, well, he would have called himself a Christian, and like I said, we've said in this podcast, we're not trying to slam religion down your throat, but I believe that a Christian is a person who has come to a point in their life when we know we're not perfect, and we know that we do not deserve the grace that we're given every day by God, and that Jesus Christ came and died on a cross for our sins, and that Christianity is openly saying to Jesus Christ, Jesus, I want you in my heart. Right. I want you to save me. I've done wrong, and I want to follow you, and I want you to be my Savior. Right. He had never been introduced to that concept, and so I didn't slam it. Right. I just said, this is.
It's an active relationship.
Right.
And I think Jim was similar. I think he had grown up around the church, but not like really had the relationship until he reached that point in his adulthood. Like,
right.
he'd had a lot of stuff happen to him before we met.
True.
That impacted who he was and that brought him to God, because it brought him to his knees, pretty much.
Realization. Yeah, I'm thankful I was bold enough to do that. And I remember so vividly, I was in Miami with my cousin at a tennis tournament. She works for a company that she has to go to tennis tournaments a lot. And my aunt and I and she were there, and I get a phone call one night from Tim, and he said, I got something to tell you. And I was like, what? And he goes, I just want you to know I prayed to ask Jesus Christ into my heart. And I was like, really? And he was the type of guy you couldn't push.
Right.
It wasn't like I could say, if you don't do this, we're never going to get married.
Right.
You know, and I don't even know that we were talking marriage then, but I think we both knew this was something.
Right.
But I was so thankful that I was bold enough to do that. And time again, it has been brought home to me. Like, I found something on his phone where he had written basically a prayer to ask Jesus Christ in his heart, and it was on his phone. And I needed, that reassurance when he went to be with the Lord. Right. I think about your story about asking the proposal.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was your all's proposal?
It's funny, he used to say, I can't wait till I get you that little blue box from Tiffany's. And I was like, okay, well, I don't need a little blue box. We kind of talked about engagement and what I wanted, if I got an engagement ring, what would it look like? And I kind of said, I always like a different stone. I don't really, I like diamonds, but I like different stones. So we took walks a lot, and we were going to go for a walk one day. He was living in a little apartment, which is funny. The apartment he lived in was the old Catholic church in our town. Okay. So I joked he could tell his mom he practically lived at church because he was Catholic. And he said, I could say, you tell your mom you really literally are in church all the time.
Yeah, you spend all your
Every time the door's open, you're there. And his dad was really faithful to the church and was like a whatever you call it, goes and gives communion to the sick and stuff. They were really an active Catholic family. And so I said that was kind of funny that he lived in the Catholic church. But I met him at his house one day on a Friday afternoon, and he was just like sweating. He goes, I got to stay here because I'm getting I've got something coming from FedEx, and and it's not come. And he was calling about it, and literally the FedEx guy comes by and he chases him down, and he's like, you got a package? And the guy handed him a package. I'm like, what is this all about? So we take this walk, and we get to Constitution Square, which is in the middle of our town, and there were some benches there, and he sits down, and he gets down on one knee, and he opens this box, and he goes, this is what I've been waiting on. He had ordered the ring on this website called Blue Nile.
Oh, yes.
And I just found all the paperwork on it the other day in the house, where you order your clarity and your cut and your color, and they create this ring for you, and it's got sapphires in it. And he opens the box, and he says, will you marry me? And I was like, okay, now I know why you were sweating. The ring wasn't coming. So that's kind of a, so Constitution Square to this day is kind of near and dear to my heart, because he was just frantic about it. Like, when's it? I was like, what are you waiting on? Why do we have to wait on FedEx, Right. So it's kind of like you. He wanted to be this picture-perfect event. And he did all that. Did Jim ask your dad?
I don't think he did, which I think my dad was a little upset about. But he did not.
Well, Tim, we went to eat one night at this.
Did he ask your dad?
He did, but in front of me. He arranged this dinner at the same place that he had stayed the first weekend he was in town.
Yeah.
He arranged this dinner. He asked my dad to go and my mom to go out to eat with us, and then during the course of the meal, he said, I'd like to ask, if I could marry your daughter. And my dad didn't hear well. My dad's like, What? And my mom goes, he's asking, can he marry your daughter, Gene? And my dad's like, well, if it's what you want to do, And my dad had always been the type, he raised a very independent woman.
Yeah.
Don't wait, don't settle, get an education, get a degree, get your own money, save your money. He was like Dave Ramsey before Dave Ramsey was cool. Yeah. He was like, pay yourself first. And when I came home, I think one time with a boy that wasn't even a boyfriend. I think I came home with a guy from school just to introduce him to mom and dad. And I think actually he was probably selling something that my mom and dad wanted to buy. And he's like, I don't know why you'd want some guy to tell you how to spend your money. When you got your own money, you can do your own things. The minute that he met Tim, they were like, I joke sometimes that I married my dad.
Yeah.
which is kind of funny. My dad didn't have an accent, but I really literally, some of the things that they did paralleled each other, and all the pieces fit. And I just knew so many things. When he would write me letters, he would send me, he sent me this one card. And he didn't say, will you marry me in the card, but he said, when we have a house together, can we have this? And the card was a picture of a rose arbor.
Yeah.
So we would drive around before we married. I don't know where we thought we were going to live. I guess we thought we were going to live in just a one-bedroom apartment. Because we got engaged in September, and we were married by May the next year, so we didn't waste any time. We never thought, where are we going to live?
Right.
I owned the house that my mom and dad lived in, but he didn't want to live out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
He wanted to live in town.
Right.
And so we would drive around on Sundays, and we would look around for houses. And one day we were driving down the street we live on, and I go, oh, there's an absolute auction back there. And he goes, there's not going to be an absolute auction on this street. Regina ran. He called me Regina ran. There's not going to be an absolute auction on this street. I said, well, it said that. So we turn around, we go back, and he goes in the front door, and I go to the backyard, and I go, you got to come back here. And going into the backyard was this rose arbor.
It was perfect.
And I was like, there's no way this is not going to be our house. And I have that rose arbor in my garden now. I've started a flower garden, a memorial garden for Tim, and the rose arbor is in that yard. We went to the house for the open house.
Yeah.
And he goes, we're not going to be able to buy this house. It's going to be way too expensive. There's all these realtors here, not going to be able to buy it. I said, well, okay, we'll just look. And we almost did not go to the auction. Almost didn't go. And it was on November 1st. I'll never forget it. And the housing market had tanked.
Right.
Blessing to us. But we go and we stand in the yard, and the guy starts the bidding at $250,000. And I'm like, well, we're not buying this house. Well, nobody bids. Nobody bids. Right. And so we're sitting there, and he takes the bid down. Finally, he takes the bid down to $150,000, and somebody bids. And I go, well, that was my budget.
Right.
Well, I have a guy with us that is a realtor. He'd been helping us, older gentleman since passed away. He goes, now, Gina, you can stretch yourself for this house. This is a good deal. You need to stretch your house. Long story short, we bid $154,000, and the guy starts to say, now, if I spell out the word sold, and nobody bids, then this house is going for $154,000. Well, it must have taken him 30 minutes to go, yes! And we stand there for a while. My friend, I turn around and my friend's driving up and down the street. And I look across the street and my friend Debbie is praying in her car. And I go, we're going to get this house. I mean, I was just like, and sure enough, the guy spells out sold, and he goes, sold for $154,000.
There's your house.
We get a great house on a great street with great neighbors. And it was just like, God was in it.
Yeah.
And I guess I can thank the housing market for not being good. I mean, I'm sorry for the people that sold the house, but it was just a great day. And so I look and I see that God just worked all these things out for a home that I love. And like you said, home is still my home.
Right.
Because that's where I feel the closest to Tim is in my house. And it's... It was a great, I mean, I'm sure there's a ton more to the story, but...
And I'm sure that we will both tell more of our stories as we go along. We will work them in, you know. Yeah. We talk about the things that we think
that
about.
we love together. I mean, life together.
Listening to you reminds me of things I should have said in my story, so I'm sure...
You chime in, sister.
I may add some more down the road, but...
I think life together, what we said before, the things that I miss the most are the things that were everyday. Yes. What people would call mundane, you know. Regina ran. Let's go for a ride. You know, let's dancing in the kitchen. You know, just his little. He'd be getting ready to go to the shower. Pardon me, Jocelyn. He'd be naked going to the shower, doing a little dance or something. And we were married. It was okay, you know. But just you know, I do believe that when God writes your love story. And I know he's my soulmate because I just knew he was going to be something like that. I never thought in 1990, that's the guy I'm going to marry. Right. But he definitely was the male version of me. Yeah. Even though he would tell me every once in a while to shut my pie hole. And people think, well, that's really rude. I go, now it's a term of endearment for us. Yeah. Oh, Gina, shut your pie hole. But yeah,
that's the thing that works for you guys.
It was good.
I don't know if, you know, some people talk about love at first sight. I don't know if you believe in love at first sight, but I do know that I remember the first time I saw Jim. And I still remember that vividly.
Oh,
in my mind.
yeah, I just remember piercing blue eyes. I actually called a friend of mine that worked with me at the time, and she was a friend of mine for years and still is a friend. And I called and I said, "Do you remember that guy, Timothy?" And she goes, "Oh my gosh, with the beautiful blue eyes." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "We've started talking." And she goes, "What?" She's like, "Oh, what?" And I could hear this story, And I said, "Yeah, I mean, I found him, and I Googled him, and
The rest is history.
it just the rest is history." And it's funny because I can get on his email. I'm not really good at it, but I can get on his emails and find all the emails between he and I. And I found that first email, and I just think how, you know, if you don't believe in God, that's your business. But there's no way that this was a coincidence. I mean,
Right.
he brought me to him, and I am so thankful every day that I was bold enough to say to him, "This is what Jesus Christ did for you." Because now I know I've got eternity with my soulmate. I'm not going to be worried about him because I'm going to be focused on Jesus, but spices up heaven a little bit. Like you said something about being spicy last week. Spices up heaven to know that I'm gonna be there. I heard somebody say once. I had a conversation with a lady about when we go to heaven, are we gonna know our spouses? Like I know there's not marriage in heaven,
Right.
but am I gonna know am I gonna live with my husband? Because Moses and Noah and all those dudes are cool, but I don't want to live next door to them. I mean, I didn't know them on this earth.
Right.
It doesn't make sense that
Right.
while they're going to be there, Jesus I have a personal relationship with. Noah,
Right.
not so much. But she said, marriage on the earth is a representation of Jesus's
Love.
relationship with the bride, the church. It's our marriages. That's what its relationship means. I didn't probably say that well. So he said, "Why would God give you this soulmate on earth and you not know him in heaven?" And I said, "All the old songs you hear, the trumpet of the Lord shall sound, and time shall be no more. We're gonna when we all get to heaven,
Right.
are we all gonna get to heaven and go, well, I don't know you?
Right.
I mean, are we gonna see? We're gonna see
Yeah.
our loved ones. I think all the old songs aren't lying to us. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know if we will or not. People can spin themselves in circles debating this thing.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is, absolutely none of us know the answer until we get there.
Darn
So
it.
I don't see that there's a problem in thinking that way.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like to me, it brings me comfort to think, I'm going to see Jim. I'm going to see, my grandparents. I'm going to
Yes,
see
yes.
my nephew that passed before he was
Right.
born. Like,
Aw.
these things bring me comfort. Whether they're true or not, I don't know. And I don't necessarily see a harm in thinking that way.
I'm like you. I
Like,
don't see.
I'm not one that, I don't see where it brings harm for me to say, that gives me a little comfort to know that God has prepared a place for me in heaven, and that place includes people I love.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And I don't necessarily see where the harm is at.
I don't
I'm not a
see-
theologian, so
No,
I
me
can't.
either. Well, and, I know that when you get to heaven, your focus is going to be worshiping
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, and I know it will all be perfect or
Yes.
whatever it is. Something that I was going to say, we always go back and forth. Kendra and I sit here and talk for hours like, oh, we should have said.
Right.
Something that I go back and say in my younger years, have you ever had the same dream multiple times? Mm-hmm. You don't really know what it means. I've had a dream for years where I was on you got married in Gatlinburg. Mm-hmm. I picture it being kind of Gatlinburg cabin. Mm-hmm. I'm on the deck of a cabin, and there's these mountains, and there's this clothesline in the backyard with sheets billowing in the wind. Right. I've had this dream vivid, not since, but before Tim and I came to be one.
Right.
I had this dream, and in my dream there was a man standing there. I never saw his face. I never knew who he was, but I knew in my dream that man is going to be the man for me. The first thing that Tim said to me when we started talking, if we have a house, can we have a clothesline? He said, because we don't dry our clothes in Australia. We put them, they're not made to really be in a dryer. Now that since changed, but here were these sheets billowing in the wind on a clothesline, and that's the first thing he says to me.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my goodness, that dream came to me.
Right.
And when we used to go to his mom's house, I used to love to hang the clothes on the clothesline because that was such a memory. When I went this last time after Tim passed away, they don't do that anymore. They dry their clothes in the dryer. And I was like, Oh, I was missing that because I just love that.
Maybe we need to hang a clothesline outside.
I know. Well, it just, it's like he said, can we have a clothesline? Because our clothes, and I said, well, you can, but, we don't really, we had a drying rack, which was kind of our joke. Everything, we dried it on a drying rack, and it's peeled the paint off the wall in our house. My brother peels a piece of paint off every time he comes in my kitchen. But, God was telling me to wait. I don't know if you felt that way, but I never felt like I needed to rush. Right. I was not a relationship junkie. I was not, like you said, I had some crushes in life. Two really big crushes on some guys that were monumental, and I still probably loved them, but they didn't love me back, which is probably a blessing, because had they, we probably would have been killing each other, but
I think I definitely wasn't in a rush to find a relationship growing up. It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't something that I rushed into. I never did a lot of that, but.
And I didn't really. I mean, when I started talking, this was just kind of a, this was kind of going to be fun, just chatting back and forth. Never did I dream I'm going to marry a guy from Australia. He's going to move all the way over here, and we talked about living there, but financially it's so expensive in Australia. We didn't think we could make the money. We thought we could live better here. And his mom and dad were like, I don't care where you live, but live near live near your mom and dad or us. And because he's got a sister in California, and she's got the only grandkids, so I think that's probably my greatest regret with not marrying him early, if we could have, is the dad thing. He later ended up teaching tennis. He did substitute teach for a bit and did start his degree, but never finished it because he started teaching and tennis, and he got all these. A friend of mine invited us over for dinner one night. Said, would you teach my kid tennis lessons? And he's like, well, yeah. And from that, he got like 5, 6, 7. Then he started driving to other counties and teaching.
He became the local coach.
Yeah, he was a local coach. And I'm sure there were other local coaches too. But yesterday I met a lady. She said, yeah, I used to take tennis lessons from your husband. I'm like, what? I never even heard your name.
Yeah.
And she's in the same field I'm in. And I'm like, really? And people showed up at the funeral and said, yeah, I took tennis lessons. And I didn't even know. Right. And, and he had nicknames for everybody. So one little girl says, yeah, he taught me tennis lessons, and he called me high maintenance. So I'm like, okay, I can see that, And he
That sounds like Jim, because he was a firefighter and they have nicknames for everybody.
I know.
Well, they never call anybody by names.
I know. It's funny too, because he worked at a country club, and the guys will all say, well, we just love him because he just knows all of our names. I'm like, no, he doesn't. He calls you all mate. And he calls everybody mate. He doesn't know your name. But he would know your face.
Yeah.
But he was bad with names. We could meet family members 15 times. He said, I only met him once. I'm like, Tim, honey, you met them 15 times. He'd say, well, now which family is this? Is this the family with... He always remembered my cousin Pam and my cousin Carla and Bethany. He knew them. But is this the family with Carla and Bethany, or is this the family with Pam? Right. And, and I'd be like, well, this is the Pam family. Certain people he would remember. Consider yourselves lucky, Carla, Bethany, and Pam.
And your family that he could connect to
those two. Yeah, because your family, because that's the only way he knows his family. But he didn't have an extensive relationship with tons of family members. Right. He has a great family, but he's close with fewer. I mean, my dad had 6 brothers and sisters. My grandfather on my mom's side had 12 brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
I think that's right. And so it's a lot. No perfection, but some days I could have strangled him. We were 2 opinionated people that got married late in life, and we had our way of doing things. But luckily, we loved each other's company. We loved some of the same things. We didn't kill each other during COVID because both of us kept working. We loved adventure. We loved to travel. Now, I mean, maybe financially we had some advantages because I had worked for 10 years before he came into my life, so I had saved well, thanks to my dad. I was able to not buy the house, but put a good down payment on the house. But we loved to travel. We would rather spend our money. Instead of buying each other Christmas gifts, we'd say, let's go on a cruise. Let's go to London. We had some great trips. Like you said, we lived a lot of life in 13 years. We didn't have a dating life because most of it was on the phone or through cards and letters.
But I think in a way that enables you to be closer in a way that you wouldn't if you had a dating. Because when you're dating, you're trying too hard to impress each other with what you see.
Yes.
But when you take away the being in person, you have to make your words count when you're writing them down. think that
When you
counts.
strip away all the fake.
Yeah, all the extra.
You're not. I didn't have to worry. Did I look good? I didn't really worry. Was I going to say the right thing? I remember one night.
You can think about it more.
Yeah, we had a conversation one night. We would talk till the wee hours of the morning. I don't work on Fridays, so sometimes on Thursday nights we would talk into the wee hours of the morning because it was daylight for him. And we had a conversation about going to the racetrack. And I said, if you go, you've got to wear certain kind of clothes. He goes, well, I'm not doing that. I'm not that kind of person. I'm not wearing that. I'm not doing that. And we kind of had a tiff about it. And, so we hung up. And the next morning he calls me and goes, I want you to know I can wear whatever you want me to wear. And not that he was going to, like, become my, he wasn't somebody that you could ever make do something.
Right.
I mean, we could just go right at each other all the time.
I will say that's a good point in a relationship. I think sometimes people approach relationships thinking that, like, you can change somebody. Or they approach it as, I won't do that because I don't want anyone to change me. Like, I won't let someone take. And I think that there's a difference because we're both kind of independent women, like, coming into this. And I think that there's a difference in, like, coming into a relationship, changing yourself to fit the person versus being willing to give certain things that need to be given. Like, there's
you don't want to be obstinate. You want to,
like we mentioned last week, there's compromise that has to happen in relationships. And it's not a matter of, like, it's not a matter of giving up yourself to another person, but it's a matter of finding a person that you can trust to be vulnerable with. And, sometimes you do need to allow things to change or vice versa. But it depends on the person.
Right. And I think I let Jesus do the changing.
Right. Well,
and the hardest thing for me was to let Jesus do the changing in Jesus' time.
Oh, yeah.
And not my time.
Yeah.
It's been confirmed. I mean, I learned things about Tim after his death that I did not know. That he was trying to get a Bible study started at the country club for men at the country club with a pastor there, and that doesn't come out of a non-relationship.
Right.
He didn't say all the Christianese things.
Right.
He didn't always do the things I thought were picture perfect Christian. What is that?
Right.
And the man he became was the man that God was leading him to become. And one of the hardest things I dealt with is he was baptized as a baby, christened in the Catholic Church. And, I'm Baptist.
Right.
I grew up Southern Baptist.
Right.
And I do believe that baptism has, it's an outward expression of an internal feeling or internal change, but it's not necessary. It's not. It's an ordinance, but it's not necessary for salvation.
For Baptists, it's just an example of the faith, not actually a requirement.
But we struggled because my church had gone through this period of where they were wanting people to say whether they were all. It was not membership, but you want to say if you were all in, and all in meant you were a baptized believer in the church. And that my church that I go to now has a little more emphasis on baptism than I believe is necessary. But they had gone to a men's group where this had really come out and had really upset him. And he was having meetings with a friend of mine at Monday morning coffee, and they were really talking, having a lot of conversations about it. And he had come to the place where he really thought he'd be baptized, and he wanted two of his friends to do it. But he never got there. And after Tim died, I struggled with, Satan whispering in my ear, well, do you know for sure that he's in heaven? And the first Sunday I went back to church after about 3 weeks because I just couldn't do it for a while. There was a pastor that they showed a clip of a sermon. His name's Alistair Bigg, and he's preaching, it's black and white, and he's preaching the sermon about the thief on the cross. The thief on the cross is being questioned when he gets to heaven. Well, what do you think about this theology and that theology? And the guy's like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, well, how in the world did you get here? He goes, the man on the middle cross told me I could come. He was not baptized, and I know some people believe differently, but that was like Jesus saying, I got him.
Yeah, I got this.
And I sat and watched a tree. From the day Tim died, there's a tree in my neighbor's yard that started to slowly turn. It was a little red patch with a cardinal singing at the top of his lungs. And I watched that tree turn from that day, and it was like, that cardinal was singing to me like, I got him. And I've talked too much.
No, you're good. I was going to say, that sounds like that might be a good place to come to a close, though. Unless you have more you want to
No,
add.
I could talk all day long, and thank you all for letting me talk all day. We like talking about our husbands.
We do like talking about our husbands. I agree. I think that's a valid thing. We would love to sit and talk all the time about them. Even though I'm not as much of a talker. My husband was the talker, but still.
We got good stories, and we'll keep talking. We'll keep telling them.
Yeah.
They'll come up again, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. But we hope that this gives you a little more insight into our stories.
Yeah, we want you to know us, and we want to know you. If you've got something to tell us, comment on our Instagram
or on Spotify. Either one, we can see comments there. And
all 10 of you.
We're slowly growing. We're growing. And we appreciate all 10 of you listening. So I guess that'll wrap it up for tonight, unless you had anything else you want to add.
Thanks. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, folks. Thank you for tuning in to Can't Find My Brain for the Fog, discussing love, loss, and life after with Kendra and Gina. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and look for new ones each week. We're going to shoot for Mondays. If you would like to give us some feedback, or maybe leave us a topic idea or question, you can find us on Instagram, Can't Find My Brain for the Fog, and we would love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in.